Welcome to Blush Theater, a division of My Turn Performing Arts Collective, LLC, and our production of Always Tess by Raymond Goodwin. This play has been a joy to direct and produce. Working with Raymond is a thrilling collaboration with a wordsmith and storyteller of the greatest skill. Kathryn is so very sensitive and responsive. Her kinesthetic and emotional intelligence shines through her performance even early on in our rehearsals. In a real way, she has been preparing for this role her whole life. Here at Blush Theater, we prefer to explore real and sincere issues of life. We believe that the dramatic exploration of difficult topics help expand our perspective and understanding of our world and enlarge our compassion for ourselves and for others. It offers opportunities for catharsis of emotions that is therapeutic for the performers and the audience alike, as we are brought together in the magic of live theater. Tonight, you are entering an intense exploration of grief and healing. It may stir some of your feelings within you. Please take care of yourself. But also, once you leave this place, please seek out whatever support you need to deal with issues that might have been stirred up. This evening and supporting us, enjoy the show.
Dear Rhonda, you remember me? Tess Calkins from good old Beasley Street? Intense but pleasant, kind of punk but stifled, a fence-sitter but brutally frank. I'm sorry, but what I remember about you most is the gobs of black hair on your forearms from a distance, and I guess up close. It looked like two happy rodents were swinging from your elbows. Also, you were skinny and as my mother used to say, as pale as canned potatoes, so your arms were a perfect storm of noticeability. Don't get me wrong, they were to scandal. Your arms, I mean, it's just that I was 11 and 11-year-old girls notice everything that happens on their street, especially a case of abnormal follicle distribution. I also remember your fight with Sue Buttle over my big brother Jace. I didn't see it, but I heard it almost came to punches. Girl punches, but still. Right? Oh, she was husky like a walrus and would have walloped you, but the way you stood your ground was widely admired up and down Beasley Street. Not that it mattered, because Jace didn't like Sue. I mean, he'd play catch with her because she could throw a baseball like nobody's business, but I promise you, he never thought about her beyond that. Does this make you feel better all these years later? Probably not. Probably the words for soothing words about teeny love is pretty small, right? About 10 minutes is my guess. Anyway, all the best. P.S. I'm writing a letter to everyone on the street from those days. Though I'll doubt I'll send many of them. I feel an overwhelming need to say a specific thing to a specific person, but I don't know who. Or what? Or how? My Aunt Lenore advised I work up to it. She's a hotshot professor at Harvard. So I guess this is a working up letter. Not an email, because Aunt Len says a working up email versus a working up letter can only come off as coming from a crank. I think I see the difference. Maybe. Anyway, you're not the specific person. But thank you for listening. Yes, again. Aunt Len read a draft of this letter and said she can clearly hear my voice in it. She says the same voice I had when I was 14. Wow, some things stick, right? Yes, again. Aunt Lenore is actually an English instructor at little old Kelliston College, enrollment 482. I'm the housekeeper in the girls' dorm. Dirty linens keep me swimming, you might say. I get 2 free classes a year at KC. Last fall, I flunked out of an art class, but it's not relevant. I guess I'm writing to you because you live next door to Darius and Darla. They lived in a blue house on the corner of Beasley and State Road. Darius and Darla. I've been thinking about them a lot lately. Dear Sue Bunnell, you stopped caring about baseball when you took up cigarettes. Also, you ran slower, even walked slower, all because of cigarettes. I was inquisitive and asked you about this, and you said it wasn't the smoking. You said it was because every Dorito you'd ever eaten in your life had gone directly to your ass. You said your digestion was defective that way. But nobody ever mentioned your ass because you were husky and called everyone hun. I liked it when you called me that. But it also made me think you were 15 going on 47. Also, listen to angry music of all genres. Also, you were a forest green windbreaker. Also, you always wore a watch cap. Also, you worked, you joined a league at the alley my father managed. Also, you hit Darius, who was defenseless, in the temple with an ice ball. He missed 3 days of school because of that. Bruise on his temple was 20 different colors. It looked like that storm on Jupiter. His sister, Darla, cried at the bus stop all 3 mornings. And the haze before sunrise, she cried. It was because she wanted to say something to you, but was afraid. To this day, I wonder what she would have said if she had found the courage. I know what I would have said, and it's this. Hun, you even think about packing up another ice ball, and I will pull your tonsils out through that fat ass of yours. The end. Honestly, Sue, if you were here right now, I'd hand you a cherry popsicle to soothe your throat from your missing fucking tonsils. Always, Tess. Yes. This is a working out letter. Dear Mrs. Swinson, you drove our school bus because you also lived on Beasley Street. I worried about you. Thought you and Mr. Swinson and your little house with all those flower pots around it were sitting ducks for revenge if, on a given day, you happened to dole out discipline on your bus. I don't know what revenge. Stone through your window, maybe? A tripwire on the door of Mr. Swinson's workshop? Or maybe just a flower pot kicked over. I always think about flower pots when I think of you. Did you ever notice our bus stop and the way the asphalt on Beasley narrowed to meet State Road, and the way those 2 long cracks along Beasley ran side by side, shaped like a flower pot? since forever I've tried to imagine flowers in the pot. The paths we children walked from our houses to the bus stop could be the stems. From the driver's seat of your bus, a few of the stems would have rose from the pot and stooped to the left, but a few went right. The flower pot had a part in its bouquet. Eris had a part in his hair like that. Lately, Mrs. Swinson, I've hardly felt enough hope to imagine flowers at the end of the stems. Sometimes I can. In my imaginary flower pot world, blossoms would represent houses. On good days, I think my house was a tulip, yours a peony, and Darius and Darla's house a rose. One withered petal. On bad days, it's harder to see. But I've been able to imagine a few of the stems sprouting pink forget-me-nots. Anyway, who knew I loved flowers so much? Always. Yes. Yes. I won't burden you with what it means. This is a working out letter. Yes. Once for 3 days in a row, as we climbed onto your bus, you didn't care to ask Darla why she had been crying, even though her face gleamed with tears. I would have sworn it was your job to ask, but all you said was, "My, what rosy cheeks." My, what rosy cheeks. My, what rosy cheeks. I confess, Mrs. Swinson, after that, I never worried about you again. Dear Benjamin, we had a swamp in our neighborhood. A swamp! Wow. I just reread that sentence, and I think that it's crazy that in a place you'd call a neighborhood there would be a swamp. But there it was, complete with bugs, scummy water, and mosquitoes big enough to mount a Pekingese. Do you remember that big log stretched out 10 feet into our swamp? And one day you walked out onto it and shot dead 500 toads with your BB gun. 500? That's what you said. That's what you bragged about. Then the guy who owned the property showed up to every door on Beasley Street and asked that the wildlife be left alone. He said that the silence of the dead toads was remarkable. Remarkable. Right then, I heard the silence he was talking about. And it wasn't a peaceful, quiet Benny boy. It was a eerie and slimy silence. That silence turned my stomach into one great big soggy mushroom. And what did you do? You felt bad about your murdering ways, so you told everyone Darius shot the toads. Darius was quiet and weird, so people could have easily believed he'd done it. Well, here's a revelation for you, Benjamin Price. I think Darius knew you had perpetrated that lie about him. After that, it seemed more burdened than usual. He struggled with the toad incident. He struggled with how people just assumed he was diabolical. He struggled because everyone teased him that his face was on a wanted poster in every toad post office in America. He struggled because he thought you were his friend. So behalf on everyone on the street, Ben, thanks a lot. Thanks for your service. And be glad someone hasn't already puked Windex to your eyeballs. Always, Tess. Aunt Lenore. Progress report. Something's happening to me. I don't know what, except now I've written letters from multiple memories when I was 11, 14, and 16 years old. I've added up the numbers, and rather than 22, I've recently turned 63. So, something's happening to me, and that must be it. I'm turning old before my time, so thank you. Also, I'm a little mad at you. You're always grinding on your students and me to read the newspaper every day so the world doesn't sneak up on us. Well, guess what? My little crisis began when I opened up the newspaper last week and the world clapped me between the eyes. And now, writing and reviewing these letters on top of it. I'm a little afraid of rereading the letters. I'm afraid I'll unconclude what I've already concluded. Conclude. Unconclude. Conclude. Unconclude. The very definition of spinning. I'm spinning! Spinning! Ah! Always, Tess. Yes. This letter will never be sent. Dear Aunt Len, I am not 14 years old. 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 Ah! Love, Tess. Yes. You seemed pained when I told you I kept these letters folded in a copy of The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Do you remember you gave me the bell jar? You weren't worried then, so why now? Because I'm fine. I am not 14 years old anymore. PSS. You always say, we might be out of solace, but there's always plenty of salad. I don't know what that means. Are you saying there's solace in the salad? Are you saying the salad is a distraction from the fact that there's no solace? I'm sorry, ma'am. We have a bean salad, a fruit salad, a potato salad. We even have a Caesar salad, but we're fresh out of solace salad. B triple S. This letter will never be sent. Dear Esther Greenwood, your creator was Sylvia Plath, the poet. She made you the narrator of her novel, The Bell Jar. The novel was really about her. Sylvia put her head in an oven. She ended it. I'm sorry for bringing that up. But if I think about things that scare me, sometimes they go away. But no luck here. Her head in that oven was on my mind the whole time I was looking up what a bell jar was. So, Esther, here's a confession, right? I could only read a few pages of your story and then I stopped. I don't know all the reasons I stopped, except I thought that I should read some of your poems first. Some of Sylvia's poems first. So I did. It was like trading toothpicks for needles. It was a bell jar. It was like she was typing your, Esther Greenwood's, story on your Esther Greenwood skin. I can picture that. I think it would have made a neat book cover. With her poems, like the one called Daddy, the one called The Hanging Man. It was like she was carving on her own soul with a knife. A sharp, unforgiving knife. That sounds gruesome, but I'll bet it was thrilling. I could feel it being thrilling for her. I could feel what she must have lost going from writing her poems and knowing that she was a poet, first of all, to writing your story. I could feel it so strongly, and then I felt listless. And I've been listless ever since. But I'm trying, Miss Greenwood. Please know I'm trying really hard not to let it work up into a catastrophe. Always. Yes. Yes. I never make promises, but I will try to finish your story. Yes. Even if you existed, this letter would never be sent. Dear Marcella Hines, you lived across Beasley Street from me. We were best friends. You had legs like a grasshopper, and our friendship ended the day you came out of your house with a dish towel over your head and walked bent over. You said you were imitating my mother. You pulled the towel tight and said my mother was Peter Rabbit's old mother. You said she was old Mrs. Rabbit. You said she was hiding from the world. Then you started chiding me. You said, does your mother live under a tree? Does your mother allow tyranny? Does your mother wear a basket on her head? Does your mother like cabbage? Does your mother know your father is baked in a pie? So long, little bunny Tessie. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. I tried to chase you out of my yard with those grasshopper legs. I could never catch you. So I resorted to my famous slow motion voice. Marcella, please stop, you little bitch. When that didn't work, I started choking. I held my breath and swallowed hard and actually made myself choke. You hated it. I did it and kept going until you ran home covering your ears. We were 12 years old, and after that, we weren't really friends. In the 11th grade, I waited for you outside health class and said hi. But you never said hi back. There was no second act for us. Anyway. Always, Tess. P.S. This is a working up letter. P.S.S. I think Darius had a crush on you. Right before he went into one of his hibernations. Dear Jairus, I remember you wore a flannel shirt even in summer. I remember the plaid was faded. I also remember the collar button was missing. Your shirt was always untucked on your right hip, and you wore the shirt every day in the 4th grade. You had to repeat 4th grade. None of us ever sweated until we got older, and you never sweated even then. Said my name rhymed with mess. I couldn't think of a good rhyme for you, so one day on the playground I called you Ferris Wheel. You didn't talk to me for 6 years after that. This isn't related. But it took you that long to outgrow your flannel shirt. I could smell your family history in that shirt. Always. Yes. P.S. This letter will never be sent. Dear Mrs. Grish, I'm sorry. Your maiden name was Karzak, and I helped spread the rumor that you were the sister of a man convicted of crimes against humanity. Poor children will do such things. I'm very, very sorry. But I remember something nobody else does. I remember when you handed out homemade Halloween candy for your porch. You gave us globs of chocolate mixed with coconut. The globs looked like murdered critters gone to maggots, but they tasted great. Your face lit up like soap bubbles. But even more delightful was your laugh. My brother, Jace, was in the school orchestra and said your laugh was like a burst of orchestral joy. He said like Brahms' Hungarian dances. I don't know about that, but your laughter filled the neighborhood, and I heard it in my mind all the way until it meshed with the music of the Christmas season. Nobody else remembers this about your laugh either. I've asked. Nobody does. I hope you're not lonely, Mrs. Fish. I hope you believe that. Always, Tess. P.S. I think you must know my father sometimes had a musical voice. When I was little and told him I wanted to be called Tess and not Tessie, he sang me this. Our little Tessie is so messy, nevertheless, she's our princessy. Now we're asked to call her just Tess, though highly improbable to hold the caress. Still we know she's only slightly a mess. She's always totally lovable, Tess. Yes. Your laughter made Darius from down the street smile. The only time I ever saw him smile. Ever. Dear Darius, remember Donnie's Market at the end of Beasley Street? Those wood floors that creaked, that tiny toy display? Over the years, my father bought me just about every toy there. Jacks, a yo-yo, a 5-inch doll, a plastic frog, and a cap gun. Donnie said it was probably the last cap gun ever sold in America. There were no caps, just the gun. Yeah. Your mother was at the counter telling Donnie his onions were no good when one day I was in Donnie's with my father to buy milk. We were standing at the toy display, eyeballing a package with 3 little plastic trucks. Red, blue, and green. You looked at those trucks with a look I'd never seen on a child's face before or since. Longing, but also with sheer love and admiration. You were giving those trucks with the spirit of your regard because you knew you would never play with them. You knew your mother would never consent to make that purchase. There was a purity in the look you gave those trucks. There was a purity in the water in your eyes. There was a purity in the way my father was watching you. In the same way you were watching those trucks, he was watching you. Then your mother went back with Donnie to look at the onions and told you to wait in the car. Next thing I remember, we are in our car, my father and I, and the brown paper shopping bag is between us on the front seat with the milk in it. Another item, too. My father glances at you at the back seat of your mother's car. Then he gets out. Opens your door. And hands you the package with 3 little plastic trucks. He tells you, "These under your shirt and find a secret place for them home." You were shocked, but you looked at him and nodded. Then, for some reason, you looked over at me and said, "Okay." It was the last time you ever spoke directly to me before I called you Darris Wheel. Always. Yes. Yes. Wonder if you still have those trucks. You don't have to tell me. Just wondering. Dear Benny Price. Me again. I just remembered that hot July afternoon with big kids playing frisbee nearby, and you drank from Mrs. Swinson's garden hose for 10 minutes straight without once coming up for air. And you lay groaning in the Swinson's yard with your belly bubbled up to twice its normal size and pulsing. I showed up just as Rhonda, Sue Bunnell, and Jace began to worry about you. Darla was there too, and when all at once your face turned blue and you convulsed, she ran next door, climbed into her dad's old pickup, wheeled around into the Swinson's driveway, and loaded you it next to her, and was off to the Ready Clinic a mile away down the business route. Here's the thing. Darla was 12 years old. And after the doctor got your electrolytes straightened out and told your mother there was a real chance you might have drowned in your own flesh, you were a touch woozy. But fine. The next day it was in the newspaper. A photograph of you sitting on the bench outside the Ready Clinic next to Darla, who was holding the key to the pickup. It makes me laugh to think about it. Lately, Benjamin had been slowly drowning in a waterless sea, so a little laughter is like a flotation device. I recognize floating as an interlude, and what I'm seeking is solid ground, but so far, the shoreline seems out of sight. Anyway, always, Tess. P.S. Why am I telling you this? Just go back to your Benniness and I'll leave you alone. Dear Daddy. Dear Daddy, I still have the postcards you sent me when I was 9 years old. I was afraid because you had gone up north for an interview, and I just knew I'd never see you again. But there were the cards in the mail, one or even two every day, mail with my name on it. I was so excited. Hi-ho, Tessie. I'm here, quiet in Uncle Mike's cabin, bowling alley very loud, too much music. But did Mom tell you I might work there? Tell Jace hello, tell Aunt Len hello, tell the house hello, tell the driveway hello, tell Tessie, oh, that's you. Hello. Wrote down wrong day, interview is Friday. Mom says just stay up here. I'm alone in the deep dark woods. Hope there's no bears. Grr. Uncle Mike took me to see a lake. Who wants to see a lake? Dum-de-dum. All pine trees must be twins. They all look alike. Dum-de-dum. Raining today, so everything is gray. And drip, 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 raindrops as big as bumblebees. Bzzz. Didn't get job. Not sad. Everything I like is on Beasley Street anyway. Home soon. You were home soon. Wanted to tell you I still have the postcard. Dear Mother, sorry, but I stole this note from the kitchen counter when I was 9 years old. Lenore, the extra key is under the toaster. Jace has banned until 5:15 Tuesday and Friday. Tessie will try to tell you she has coffee and cookie dough for breakfast, but there's orange juice and Eggo waffles in the refrigerator. I've postponed the water heater inspection, but if the man shows up, just tell him to pick any day next week and come back. My plan is not to go all the way to meet your brother until after the interview. First, I'm staying a couple days in Cadillac with my sister. You can reach me there at 231 blah blah blah. I took the note, Mother, because you didn't call Daddy the kid's father or my husband. You didn't identify him by his primary purpose. You called him Aunt Len's brother. I stole the note because I thought that would give her the wrong idea about us. I was young and didn't know it was doing the opposite. I didn't know anything. Always Tessie. Dear Esther Greenwood, I've now skimmed your story. Just skimmed, but wow. Electric shock therapy. I wonder if writing letters would have helped you. My Aunt Lenore's favorite book is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I read about 9 pages of once. But I skimmed enough to know that when Aunt Len said Hester Prynne would have benefited from writing letters, I knew what she meant. Hester turned a cold shoulder to get along with the world. What choice was there for her? Esther chose fire. Esther chose ice. Those were the choices. I think that's why I've only skimmed your and Hester's stories. To avoid a description of being less. Always Tess. Always Tess. And no less. Dear dearest, you remember Mrs. Runts? Mrs. Runts was the Club Scout den mother in our neighborhood. She wore the official yellow blouse and blue shirt and blue collar tie, and every Thursday after school welcomed through the side door of her home a troop of little boys in blue uniforms and yellow neckerchiefs. I remember the first Thursday of one school year, and as the boys filed in, you and Darla came running up the Runts' driveway, and just as Mrs. Runts was closing the door, Darla called, "Wait!" Mrs. Runts paused and even smiled at you. But I had the angle, and I assure you her hand was searching mightily for the lock. Darla said she was dropping you off and was sorry you were late. Mrs. Runts said she didn't recall seeing your name on the roster and gave Darla a glance that registered a stirring of maybe 4 molecules and not 1 atom more. What I'm saying is she registered your sister as a nobody. You were wearing your flannel shirt and watched the scene as if it had nothing to do with you. And Darla asked Mrs. Runts if she would check the roster, and Mrs. Runts said, "No, honey, I don't need to check the roster." Darla was 10 years old and stout even then. "He's supposed to be here," she said. And Mrs. Runts said, "I think he's not." And Darla's stoutness was compact somehow, and though her face went a little red and her forehead beaded with a little sweat, the overall effect was of a 30-year-old woman self-possessed. "Well, that's not fair," she said. And at that moment, the wind, the leaves on the trees, the dogs barking, and the traffic on State Road just stopped and went silent because justice had arrived on Beasley Street, and justice was named Darla. Mrs. Runts stopped stroking the lock, mumbled something, and went inside. She came back with a piece of paper, the roster, I guess. She opened the door wider and looked at you. You just stood there. And you did this thing which you did a lot, which was to look down the length of your arm as if you were a little surprised it was there. You didn't move your feet. Finally, Mrs. Runts said, "Does he want to come in?" And Darla told you, "Go ahead." You started and stopped 3 times, but you finally unhitched yourself and lurched in. Without looking at Darla, Mrs. Runts said, 6 o'clock, and shut the door hard in Darla's face. And for the first time in my life, I felt a rush of hatred for another human being. Darla waited for you at the end of the Runts' driveway. There was no curb at the end of the street, so she just sat at the edge of the asphalt. 6 o'clock, you came out, walked home with your sister. Never came back. Never. Always, Tess. Yes. While she waited, I walked out and gave Darla a cookie without M's in it. She just looked at me and said, "You don't want it?" I shook my head. I didn't say anything because 7-year-old girls don't just walk up to 30-year-old women and start babbling. Anyway, Darla took a bite of the cookie, nodded a little sadly, and told me it was good. For a half hour before you came out, I loved her more than anyone on earth. Dear Aunt Len, progress report. I'm writing this at 3:17 a.m. I can't sleep. There are endless strands of hair on my pillow. Funny, right? That they fell out while I was awake. Oh well. I'm now 92 years old. Always, or maybe not always, Tess. Yes. Here's my best Sylvia Plath-ish poem. I never thought it wise to laugh at my demise. I never thought it cute to turn my song to mute, but if I could bottle lying to oneself, I'd put it on a shelf and claim that's just the way I stand. No place to finally land. Just sullen music from my sullen flute. PSS. Again, this letter will never be sent. Dear Mr. Grish, you drove your big rig all over the country. Also, you always wore cowboy boots. Sometimes I would lie in my bed at night and imagine you driving your truck across the top of the USA with your pointy cowboy boots pushing hard on the accelerators. The engine made it a long, lonesome whine all the way from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Duluth, Minnesota. And after that, you'd be home in Michigan for a day and then be gone again. Once, when I was about 12, I was sent to your house by my mother. I used to know why, but I blocked it from my memory. To tell your wife something, or maybe it was to look for something. Anyway, when I got to your back door, I could see Mrs. Grish through the screen sitting at the kitchen table. Spread out before her was a large square of cookie dough. In the center of the dough was a hole in the shape of the man. The man was missing, right? So I thought of you. It wasn't a gingerbread man because your wife was whispering to it. Richard, so sorry. I'm so sorry, Richard. Richard is your name, right? Funny. I didn't think about it till now, but Richard is also my father's name. That hole in the dough is all I really remember. That and your wife had 3 fingers pressed so hard against her forehead, her knuckles had turned white. I didn't say anything to your wife and left before she saw me. But I walked home, and I remember this so well. On my way home, I saw Darla trying to coax Darius out of the parents' blue house with a cherry popsicle. We used to call Darla the barrel woman, even though she was only 16 or maybe 17 years old. Not viciously, but she was built stocky like all of our favorite aunts. So everyone said so let me emphasize favorite aunt. I'll stop here by saying I hope you and Mrs. Grish are alive and well and have figured it out. Always, Tess. P.S. This is a working up letter. You don't know what that means. It's only now kind of due myself. Dear Jace, do you remember the summer you painted Darius and Darla's house? You painted it the same blue color it always was. That blue color was the color of dusk, a split second before the night showed its teeth. That's what I thought of the color when I was 14. Still do. You fell off your ladder when you tried to look in the little window near the peak of the roof. Nobody blamed you for looking. We all knew why you did it. It was because no one had seen Darius since April. You broke your wrist and kneecap and were knocked out and could never recall what you saw in the window. But you said you saw something. And you said it wasn't good. Now, the strange part. The next day, a word in little black letters appeared on the freshly painted wall beneath the window. Someone said Darius must have leaned out with a crayon and scratched a word there, but you said no. The window had been nailed shut. That part, at least, you remembered. That word was like the Mona Lisa. Every time you looked at it, it looked different. Sometimes it said pinwheel. Sometimes it said Play-Doh. Sometimes Psycho. Sometimes party. Sometimes pedophile. but no one was willing to get close enough to see for sure. Except one day, I decided someone should, so I went myself. No one ever went in Darius and Darla's yard, not even stray dogs. You said you went because it served your sense of irony, but people didn't feel safe there. Too many times people heard their belligerent mother shout, "State your business and get out!" Too many people wondered where their strange father had wandered off to. There I was, in their yard, the most beautiful pink forget-me-nots tickling the skin between my toes. And when I got to the wall of the blue house, I looked up, saw. It wasn't a word at all. It was just some twigs that had blown off the big maple on the corner. So I went to the corner of Beasley and State Road and yelled, "It doesn't say anything, it's just twigs!" After that, nobody thought about Darius. Not for a long, long time did anyone think one iota about Darius. Wow, Jace. Twigs. Always. Hussy. Yes. I love you. Please know. No matter what happens. Love you. Dear Antland, I've aged into particles that have floated into the atmosphere and will fall back to Earth as tears, or maybe rain. Something has happened to me. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm close to the end. Dear Mother, I'd love to talk to you, but I'm late. I'm really late for some reading. Love, Tessie. Yes, I read all day and I read all night. I read with tears and with all my might. I read all day and I read all night. I read with fear but never took flight. I read all day and I read all night. I read, and there was light. I used to read to you when I was a little girl. I think loved it. Loved it. Dear Hester Greenwood, I've now finished your bell jar story cover to cover. I read with my eyes half closed, sometimes afraid of what I was in for. Given your creator's state of mind, it's a miracle you weren't stillborn. But there you were, suicidal and frightened, and talking in a way that was raw. I'm at a point that if things aren't raw, I can't hear them. If things aren't raw, I can't say them. If things aren't raw, I'm not even sure that I'm breathing. But now, whoosh, breath. You weren't from Beasley Street, but Sylvia Plath meant for you to be here. I'm sure of that. You were meant to be on every street in the world. You turned some things over in your life and harmed yourself. But in turning over other things, you turned out okay. The more I read, the more I felt optimism creeping into your story, like a slow dawn. It was a matter of saying things to people, and saying things to yourself, and knowing that when each dawn breaks, I am free to choose. I'm free to choose. I am free to choose. I am free. Sylvia Plath put her head in an oven, but she made sure her children were safe first. That's in her favor. Always, Tess. P.S. This is my last working up letter. Even if you were bones and flesh and marrow and brains, you wouldn't know what that means. Maybe you would. Dear Darla, for a while I wanted to tell someone about this thing that happened in our neighborhood. I guess I wanted to tell you. When I was 14, a kind of spell fell over Beasley Street, and I remember two things most. The first, light became different. Like a big lamp had been switched down a notch, or that a lampshade had been set over a bare bulb. Shadowed light. That's what it was. The second thing, the many things I loved about the neighborhood became fuzzy. Trees, bushes, and Mrs. Swinson's flowers. Of course, it was around the time my father died. I didn't know what to do. That shadowed light pouring down on me, it smothered me. I thought my lungs had disappeared. I wasn't sure I was breathing. So I climbed the big maple on the corner. Everyone climbed that big maple, right? It took our old ladder to get to the first limb, but everyone did it. Maybe I was trying to get closer to the sun, but no. I knew what I was doing at that top of the tree, and I was going to put a stop to this lampshade world. My father had been found dead, see? Which is to say no one saw him die. Which is to say he died alone. I have to stop here. I read last week Darius died. I'm so sorry. They said that he was found dead upstairs in the blue house. I won't ask you to tell me what it was. An affliction. Or an infliction. It took me a week of rivers to get my mother to tell me which one caused my father to die. The beginning of the spell was when she told me. That's when the world shaded and went fuzzy. That's when it lost all of its shade and became a world of worthless stuffed chairs. on Beasley Street, that high, and I knew what I was going to do, and I knew it was the right thing because I had been given a sign, which was that idiot Benny Price coming along and dragging the ladder away, God knows where. But it didn't matter because I was going to jump. And not later, but sooner. Then I began thinking about the time you were holding a cherry popsicle and hoping to get Darius down from his room and into the world again. The memory of you trying to help Darius calmed me. And there was a wind in the maple, the kind that makes a distant boom, 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 boom. It had a rhythm. Not at first, but because I was calmer, I kept listening, and there it was. A hymn my dad used to hum. We never went to church. And I was always asking him what he was humming, and so there in the tree, and here now, I could never ask him again because Mrs. Grish told him their fare was over, and he'd come home and chugged a fifth of tequila, and his brain exploded. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. As I was listening to him, I saw your brother Darius for the first time in months. He came out the back door of the blue house and walked to your mother's clothesline. He had a small knife, and he cut down both of her lines, and he crossed the yard and braided them into one rope. Then he tossed over one end over the first limb of the maple, and notched it tight. Set and notched tight. My escape route back into the land of the living. The past few days, I found comfort in thinking maybe Darius isn't really dead. That he's just feeling an extreme case of what most of us feel. Invisible. Maybe all those years he was so sad the body chemistry in the cell that decides thin pigmentation just gave up and left him invisible, and we walked right through him. And he fell down and was hurt, and we never knew it. But we do now. I'm not sure what good it does, but we do. I have an aunt who looks like you, who always says, we might be out of solace, but there's always plenty of salad. Today, I think I almost know what that means. Still, and I guess this is what I wanted to tell you. I'd rather have a popsicle. Cherry, please. All the best. Always, Tess. Yes. I have a new clothesline for your mother.